start, you're going to need a serger, and we're using a Baby Lock 1034D. And also just a regular domestic sewing machine, and this is a Singer Heavy Duty. And the links for these machines will be in the description. You'll need a sweater, and you can pretty much use whatever sweater you want. And we're using a standard knitted sweater that we just found at Salvation Army. You'll need fabric, and we're using a standard sweatshirt fleece, which you can find at pretty much any hobby store, but we do have a link in the description if you're looking for it. Then you'll need cord for the hood adjustment. You'll need eyelets, and we're using 5/16. I highly recommend that because it's a little bit bigger. And then lastly, your pattern, which is available at properfitclothing.com. And this is an awesome pattern to use all around. It comes with a hood and a pocket panel, and this is more of a cowl neck hood, so it wraps around really nicely, and then the pocket is a perfect size. So go ahead, cut that out, tape it together. So go ahead, take your hood panel, and you're gonna wanna trace and cut out 4 of them. And since this hood is a little bit bigger, I recommend getting about a yard to a yard and a half just to be on the safe side. Then go ahead, take your pocket panel, trace, and cut out 2 of them. Then once you have everything cut out, you're gonna wanna go ahead and grab 2 hood panels, place the right sides together, and you're gonna wanna sew just that front edge. And we are using a serger. If you don't have a serger, it's no big deal. Just go ahead and do a zigzag stitch. Then go ahead and grab the other 2 hood panels, place right sides together, and do the exact same seam. Next, go ahead and lay them out flat with right sides together, and you're gonna be sewing all the way across that top edge. And really, you just have to make sure that the top seams are lined up. And a little trick, we like to start at the top, right at the middle of that seam, so that way it doesn't go out of line when you're sewing all the way through. So just start at the top, sew down one side, and then flip it over and sew down the other side. Once you have that sewn, go ahead and flip the right side out. Next, we're going to be installing the eyelets, but first we have to mark where we want to put them, and we're going to be putting ours on one side. If you want to go and have them symmetrical, even across on both sides, you can totally do that, but we want to have the effect where they're coming down off of one of the sides of the hood. So just cross it over in front and mark where you want them. Then go ahead, cut the holes, place the eyelets in, and we're going to be using a little hammer die for this. It's super easy. You can find this at pretty much any hobby store, but all you have to do is put the backing on and then hammer it in, and you're good to go. And we will have a link for this in the description, so if you are looking for that, go ahead and check it out. And then go ahead and do the same thing for your other marking. And you're gonna wanna get them as close as you can to that inside seam. And also only install these on the outside layer. You don't want it to go all the way through because you are gonna fit that cord through there. So the next step is just adding a guide all the way around. Pretty close to the edge, you're gonna do it on the outside of the eyelet, so that way the cord can feed in there and all the way around. And this is just simply done by doing a straight stitch all the way around that front edge. I recommend using that eyelet as a guide to where you want it to lie. So just follow up from the bottom, a straight stitch all the way along towards that guide, and then keep that same distance from the edge all the way around. And we just did one straight stitch all the way around. You can totally add a decorative stitch or multiple stitches for a different look. It's totally up to you. Next, we're gonna be assembling the pocket, and all you have to do to start is place right sides together. And you're gonna wanna start by just sewing the side and the pocket entrance edges. Do not sew the top or the bottom edge. And again, we're using a serger. If you don't have one, it's not a big deal. Just use a zigzag stitch. Then go ahead, flip the right side out, and what you're gonna wanna do is sew the top and the bottom. And we're using a serger for this because it's gonna clean up that edge and bring it together. But if you don't have to use a straight stitch, it's totally fine. It's just making sure that the pocket stays together and is aligned. Once you have the edges on the pocket nice and poked out, we're gonna go ahead and add a top stitch just to the vertical sides. You're gonna wanna do this as close as you can to that edge. Once you have the vertical ones done, we're gonna go ahead and do it to the diagonal side as well, but we're gonna go in a little bit more, about 1/2 inch. And then go ahead and do that for both diagonal edges. So now that everything is ready and assembled to attach to the sweater, we're gonna go ahead and make a quick adjustment to this sweater because we don't really like the neckline. If you want, you could put the hood under that little sort of turtleneck, but we're gonna go ahead and cut that off right around on the seam. And this will also give us a little bit bigger neckline to work with, which is pretty good for when you're adding on a hood. So you're gonna wanna go ahead and kind of see where your hood falls on the neckline to make sure it measures up right. Once you find that, you're gonna wanna go ahead and pin the front. And this pattern is super easy to adjust. Just move it out or in as far as you want, and you'll fit pretty much any neckline. And you're gonna wanna add pins just to the hood alone, so that way you can keep those edges all down and lined up. It makes it 1,000 times easier for when you're attaching it to the sweater. And once that's all pinned up and ready to go, make sure your sweater is inside out and your hood is right side out. And then you're gonna wanna stuff it in there and place right sides together, lining up the back. And we're using that back seam and we're lining up with the back tag. Go ahead and place a pin right there. Then using that back center as a guidance, we're gonna go ahead and place a pin right at the front. You can place more pins around the sides if you want, but we're just gonna go ahead and use those as our reference and sew it together. And then what you're gonna wanna do is just do a straight stitch all the way around and make sure you're getting all the layers when you're sewing. That's the biggest thing for this step, is just keeping all of them lined up as you're sewing, and pretty much from there, you're good to go. Also, make sure the ends are sewed towards the inside, and we do a little bit extra on the pattern so that way it's easy to sew through and they don't stick out. Sometimes I see those stick out and it's easy to have a little bit extra there so you can pull it out and sew over it and then cut them off in the end. Then go ahead and pull it right side out. And don't forget to remove the pins. As you can see, we left them in, but for the most part, you can see it's centered and also the cord falls along the side. Moving on, we're gonna be installing the pocket. So you're gonna wanna make sure it's centered and also about 1 inch or 2 up from the bottom. And what you do is flip it up once you found your spot and then pin it. And you're gonna be sewing it right on that edge. So go ahead and take it to your sewing machine and stitch all the way across that bottom edge. And as you can see, when you flip it back over, your pocket is in place and the top edge looks super clean. And now for the bottom, what you're gonna wanna do is roll over that bottom edge and pin it into place. And what you're gonna do is sewing across on the top with a straight stitch. I recommend using a thread that matches so that way you don't really see it. But honestly, it's really up to whatever look you're going for. And then taking a little bit further, we're gonna add a top stitch to that top seam so that way it matches the bottom. And it will also add a little bit of strength and make it more flush with the sweater. And then the final step for the pocket is sewing up the vertical side. And for this part, you're definitely gonna wanna do a nice stitch here, do a tack stitch at the top so that way it stays, because it's gonna get a lot of use and you don't want it to rip out of the sweater. And there you have it, your pocket is attached and looks nice. Next, we're gonna be feeding the cord through the eyelets, and typically I use a safety pin, but I couldn't find one, so I just taped a screw onto the end of the cord and I use that as a guide to feed it through. And pretty much all you're doing is using that to feed it through and feel it with your fingers and keep pushing it along. And it's a lot easier when you have something that's more heavy that you can kind of guide through there, because it's really hard just moving that cord alone. But once you get all the way through, go ahead and pull it out to your desired length, and there you have it. And then a little extra touch is adding the cord stoppers on, and you're good to go. And there you have it, your ugly sweater transformation is complete. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment. Let us know what you think. If you have any other ideas for videos, definitely send them our way. We'll try to make it happen for you. But until then, we're going to keep the videos coming at you, so we'll see you next time.